sorry about the problems. We're not very good at this technology stuff, but we are learning, so hopefully today's will be a little bit better than last week's in some regards, a little bit less waffling, a little bit, now I'm looking at you. Wow, Bobby, that's very impressive. So, today we're talking about the difference between an estimate and a quote. So thank you for bearing with us, and I'll get stuck into the meat now. When you're getting someone to come and give you a price for work at your house, there's a massive, massive difference between an estimate and a quote. An estimate is basically exactly that, a guess, and a quotation needs far more reason to change. So when you're comparing two different prices, it's very important that you're comparing a quote with a quote or an estimate with an estimate. So if I just start with an analogy, if you go to a restaurant and you order your meal, and then when you get the bill, the waiter says, "Oh, by the way, we've had to add 40% onto that because the sirloin steak was particularly difficult to cook this evening," you would quite rightly feel conned. Now, a restaurant also has to plan days or weeks in advance. This menu wasn't printed this morning. They have fluctuating labour costs, they have fluctuating overheads, they have fluctuating market conditions. They also don't know how much they're going to be paying for the materials that they're using, i.e. the food and stuff, until the day. But that's no reason why they can't factor all these things into their costs when they produce their menu. And just about every job is the same. I can't think of many industries where it's not the same. You know, you don't know exactly to the penny what things are going to cost. So there's no reason why a building project shouldn't be, in most cases, able to be costed as accurately as a menu. So the reason a lot of people use an estimate rather than a quotation are sort of self-explanatory, really. It's to protect the builder. If I only give you an estimate, then I've got the right, if you like, to change my mind, to increase the costs. There's several reasons why those costs will increase. Now, a lot of builders will give you an estimate, and they'll be good builders, they'll be reliable, conscientious people, and a lot of them won't be that. And there are several reasons why a cost can change, particularly when it's an estimate. Those reasons include inexperience. So the person who's doing the work is inexperienced at producing a quote or inexperienced at producing the work. In either case, it can lead to it being inaccurate. Poor diligence. Perhaps they don't know exactly either what you want or how to produce it. They don't know enough about the medium within which they're working, be that interpreting what you want, or be it what materials or labour costs. They could literally be error prone, you know, make mistakes. There aren't many people who go into bricklaying and they've got a background in paperwork and finance and that kind of thing. And the last cost, the last sort of reason for an estimate going up, and it's the most sinister one really, and it's the one you should try and guard against, is an unscrupulous builder trying to win the work. So if, for instance, someone is, Zelda's going to join us shortly, I believe, you might remember Zelda from last week, but if you believe you're quoting against 3 or 4 other people and you really want to win the work, and you think the project is going to cost about £20,000, you might put an estimate in of £15,000, knowing that somewhere along the lines you're going to need to increase those prices because you want to win the work, and you know the client's far more likely to go with your quote at £15,000 than the people you're competing against. So, in broad terms, an estimate can't be very easily controlled by the client, and a quote really needs a good reason to increase. The Cambridge Dictionary actually defines an estimate as a guess or calculation of the cost, size or value of something. So, you know, the dictionary definition of an estimate is a guess. So that's all well and good if you're dealing with a builder that you can trust, you know he's diligent, you know he knows what he's talking about, and you believe that his guess is good, and you have reasons to believe that. Otherwise, you're really rolling the dice. You can probably gather by now I'm suggesting that in the absence of a reason to do otherwise, you really should be looking for quotes more often than not. Now, once you get a quote, if you're looking at a quote, you have to make sure that it is going to act like a quote. Quotation is really only not an estimate if it's nice and detailed. So when you look at a quotation, it should be quite clear what's included, critically what's not included. It should also be quite clear what within that is estimated, how that's estimated and what that estimate is. So to try and explain that quickly, if a quote just says quotation to build your garage £10,000, that's not a quote. It's barely an estimate, because they haven't told you what materials they're going to use, they haven't told you what size it's going to be, they haven't told you anything. You've really got no feel about the quality of stuff that's going to be used or the final product you're going to get. If the quotation was to go into a lot more detail, excavate the foundations, remove all the waste from site, etc, 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 start to finish, so you can look at it and you feel like you could give that. I'm not suggesting you do this, it would be quite unscrupulous, but there should be enough detail within there to give it to another builder and them know what to build, basically, off the back of that quote. So that should all be in there. And then finally, the last thing I want to talk about is the actual assumptions, because with the best will in the world, most jobs, we as a company, although we try, we can't even give an absolute fixed price on everything. But what we can do is be clear about the items within the quote that we have set aside an estimated amount for. So there's two parts to this really. For instance, if we're doing an extension, we might say, okay, so we know we've got to dig the footings, but we don't know what's under your ground. So we might say we've allowed a figure of X to excavate your footings, and we've based this figure on not finding any asbestos or whatever under the ground, and the building inspector being happy to the depth we've excavated. We're planning to excavate at a depth of 800 millimeters, and we expect this to take 4 days. If that's all in there, then what that allows you to do when you're looking at that quote is, when you get to that point, if there are unexpected changes that are beyond your control, you can say, right, okay, fine, so it looks like this is now going to take 6 days. We know you'd allowed 4. You should have a list of the builder's hourly rates for the things that are going to be added, if any. So you know exactly what the extra charge is, as in you've got control of it. You're never going to get into a case where you're kind of just crossing your fingers and hoping the builder looks after you. It's all there, set out, fair for all parties. The other thing where costs can change would be where a PC sum is allowed. For example, a bathroom or a kitchen. You might not know what taps you want yet in your bath at the point that the builder's giving you a price off the drawings. So it would be sensible to include in there a PC sum has been allowed for taps. This figure is X. So when you get there, you know if they've allowed 40 quid for a set of taps, you want to spend 80, you know that's going to be an additional £40. You also know if you want to spend 20, it's going to be a saving of £20. So that's the difference between a quote and an estimate, why you should really look for quotes, and how to make sure your quote acts as a quote. There are lots more I could talk about around this issue, but that's pretty much all I've got for today. Please like, share, subscribe. If you feel this is a useful video, please tell people about it. My goal is to give as many people as possible the information so that they can make good decisions, whatever they might be. Last thing I'll say before we go is that over the next 2 weeks we'll be dealing with, unless one falls over the Christmas holidays, in which case there'll be a break, I'm not sure, but over the next 2 videos we'll be talking about the 2 subjects, consumer rights and PC sums. The reason I'm mentioning those now is because they relate to what we've discussed today. Your quotation is actually covered by your consumer rights. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means, how you can protect yourself, and how these things all act. And PC sums, we're going to talk to you in a little bit more detail about how you need to be aware of certain manipulations builders can use within the quoting process around that subject. So that's us for tonight. Thank you very much. I'll say it again: like, share, subscribe. This video will be going up on YouTube shortly. Thank you very much. See you next week.